Chapter 11, Dark Before the Dawn. Johnny stood in the middle of the command room back at the loom mill, map table lit by dim chem lamps, eyes scanning the fresh recon reports laid out like puzzle pieces dripping blood. The city was quiet now, but it wasn't peace. It was the silence that came before a deeper storm. He slammed his fist onto the edge of the table, making one of the half-burned Millersville maps jump. It's too soon. He looked around. Helena, Elias, Milo, Craig, all present. All watching him with a mix of unease and attention. We are not even a full half-century past the day the world went to hell. What? 30 years, give or take. The skies were still glowing red back then. He stepped back, motioning to the diagram of one of the vertibirds. Rensfield sketch. Accurate down to rivets. That kind of gear? Vertibirds. Plasma rifles. Uniform grade power armor? That doesn't just come from a vault cracking open and someone getting lucky with blueprints. We're the superpower in this region. We've got tanks. We've got mutants in armor. We've got the Brotherhood running infrastructure and the best gunsmiths this side of the Mississippi, and even we don't have that kind of tech or numbers. Elias leaned forward, arms crossed, voice low. You think they're a splinter of us? Johnny didn't answer at first. He looked at the flag again. The eagle. The shield. The black background. No, he said finally. The Brotherhood might hold on to tech and doctrine, but they abandoned the flag. He stared at the image on the screen. That damn eagle. These bastards. They're still flying it. You noticed it, didn't you? Pristine. No wear. No burn. Like they've been waiting for the moment they could raise it again. Milo nodded slowly. No one uses the old symbols anymore. Even the survivors who remember don't wave stars and stripes. It's dead to M. Ghost of a nation that let the bombs fall. Johnny's jaw tightened. Exactly. Whoever these guys are, they're not just pretending to be soldiers. He leaned forward now, tapping the flag symbol. They feel official. Too structured. Too uniform. Everything from their speech to their engagement strategies, it's not like raiders or militias or even vault-trained security. They're not just some post-war group trying to rebuild. He straightened up, voice quieter now but heavy. They're the government. Helena's eyes widened. But the government's gone. The entire chain of command was obliterated on day one. Even the Brotherhood doesn't claim to be part of the actual US legacy. Johnny nodded. Yeah. Because the Brotherhood left the government. They took the tech, the mission, but abandoned the system. These assholes. They're not the offshoot. They're the seed. Dash. Elias stepped forward, eyes narrowed. You think they're what's left of the pre-war state? Hidden away. Johnny looked up at him. Steady. Not just left. Preserved. Prepared. Trained to rise after the dust settled. He exhaled slow. And now they're crawling out of whatever hellhole they've been hiding in, thinking they still get to be in charge. Crag muttered, almost to himself. Government never liked losing power. Milo spat onto the floor. Guess they think the bomb was just a long coffee break. Dash. Johnny turned away from the table, coat swinging behind him as he paced once toward the window overlooking Lancaster's western block. We need to know more. Where they came from. How many there are. What they're calling themselves. He looked back at the room, at everyone who'd fought beside him. But make no mistake. They want to rebuild America. And they're willing to burn everything we've built to do it. Johnny stopped in his tracks. His eyes narrowed like something buried in his memory just clicked, unearthed not from documents or dreams, but from somewhere deeper. Older. He turned slowly toward Helena, voice low and deliberate. Wait a minute. There was a conspiracy back before the bombs. Talk shows, fringe papers, some underground broadcasts. He looked at Elias, at Milo. Anyone old enough to remember the whispers. People used to talk about a shadow group. Government within the government. Pulling strings behind the curtain while the country chased war and oil. He nodded to himself. We all passed it off as paranoia. Vault fever. Anti-Fed nonsense. Then. He looked at Helena, voice sharper now. You still have access to the old Vault Tech terminals, right? The ones we pulled from the comms chamber and the medical wing of 717. Helena nodded, already walking to the command console and firing up the old processor stack. One of them flickered with a blue-green glow, original interface crackling back to life, keys stiff with age. Johnny stood over her shoulder. Type it in. She hesitated. What am I searching for? He didn't blink. Enclave. The word entered the search bar like a trigger. The terminal whined, then paused. No spinning cursor. No crash. Just one response. Restricted access, code lines 8 and 9, unauthorized query logged. Helena blinked. No files. No text. Not even a basic clearance error. Just this. Johnny's eyes darkened. That's not a denial. That's a warning. Something was there. Elias leaned in now. I've seen logs like that before. Not Brotherhood logs, military. High-tier encryption protocols. You only get that kind of block when the system's designed to burn the access route after you knock. Helena stared at the screen, typing a follow-up query, anything trying to sidestep the lockout. Nothing. Keen stepped in with a separate terminal, trying to isolate the request string. It's not that the data isn't here. It's that something went out of its way to hide it. Johnny looked around at them, back straight, eyes locked on that one word. Enclave. It was just a whisper. Just a ghost from before the end. But now it had a face. Now it had armor. Now it had plasma weapons and vertibirds and a goddamn army. And now Lancaster had a name for the nightmare burning its borders. Johnny spoke, voice calm, cold, absolute. Start digging. Old terminals. Dead radio bands. Underground server bunkers. Whatever we've got. Because this enclave, it didn't start now. It started before the world died. And I want to know why the hell it's come back now. The war room was dim when the runners started coming back. Dust-caked, wide-eyed, silent before they even spoke. Johnny stood in the center of the map table, his arms crossed, eyes fixed on the tattered courier bags being unloaded by the mill's dispatch crew. Letters. Recordings. Field notes. None of them good. Helena was the first to break the silence, flipping open a bound leather satchel labeled Philadelphia Trade Route Cycle 3. She read aloud. One of the southern caravans got hit hard outside Allentown. Said they were ambushed by men in black armor, same emblem we saw, eagle and shield. Full tactical sweep, not raiders. They took people. Left no bodies, just burn marks and clean soil where the bodies should have been. She looked up at Johnny. They're not just fighting. They're taking. Milo growled low. We sent 5 caravans. 4 came back. That 5th one? It was headed north, along the old Route 222. Last word was near reading. He tapped a map. Locals say the sky lit up green one night. That was a week ago. We haven't heard shit since. Elias stepped forward, laying out 2 more reports, one from a Brotherhood offshoot operating out of a reclaimed rail yard near DC, another from a scrapper's ring deep in New Jersey. Both said the same thing. Vertibirds. Black armored soldiers. Cold tactics. Heavy firepower. Helena sat slowly. This isn't isolated. We've got contact points in Baltimore, York, Harrisburg, Trenton, New Haven, even whispers coming out of Boston. Wherever they're moving, they're doing it with purpose. Same gear. Same behavior. Same goddamn flag. Johnny stared at the wall, knuckles white around the edge of the table. Then he spoke, quietly. They're everywhere. The entire East Coast's touched them in some way. Trade routes, vaults, scrap towns, survivor camps. We thought Millersville was a first strike. He shook his head. It was just our turn. Cragg stepped in, his voice low, gruff. This ain't a rogue unit. This is a system. A machine. The kind that doesn't stop unless you tear out every cog. Johnny nodded once, sharp. We've fought mutants. Raiders. Tech cults. the darkness in that vault. But this. He looked around at them all. This is a shadow of the world that dropped the bombs. The people who let the sky burn and still had the balls to think they'd walk out and be in charge again. He stepped back from the table, the weight of realization behind every word now. The Enclave isn't rising. They've been waiting. And now they're moving. He looked to Elias. To Helena. To Milo. To Crag. To Lancaster. So we move too. We find them. We learn everything. And then. His eyes glowed faintly, brighter than they had in weeks. We end them. The war room went still. That kind of stillness that only ever came right before someone suggested something truly suicidal. Johnny's words were still hanging in the air. We end them. And already the table was alive with maps, reports, name drops. Helena scrolling through recovered terminal logs. Elias laying out Eastern defense routes. Milo lighting up a smoke without a single word. The silence broke as Helena tapped a finger on Harrisburg, the old Pennsylvania state capital. If they were federal, maybe we go here. Old Capitol files, records, archives from after the war. Johnny shook his head without hesitation. Pointless. This thing was deep black even before the bombs dropped. Nothing this tightly guarded would have been on any public index. Elias nodded. She's right. I saw Brotherhood files that were redacted to hell back before the schism. The Enclave, whatever it really was, wouldn't have left its name on the front door. Milo exhaled a thick cloud of smoke and leaned forward slowly, eyes cutting sideways toward Johnny. So you thinking what I'm thinking? The room looked between them. Johnny didn't answer at first. Then, a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile. Not a smirk. Something colder. No way, Helena said before anyone could breathe. We've talked about this. DC is a death wish. Ruins, radiation zones, collapsed highways, super mutants in the metro systems, automated defense systems still firing on anything with a heartbeat. Milo looked over at her. A death wish for you guys, maybe. He looked back to Johnny. But for the Vault Ghost. Johnny's eyes gleamed, pupils shrinking under the soft flare of the wall lamps. It's a hell of a long walk. And a longer shot. He looked back at the map, eyes drawn to the dead heart of the old world. Washington, D.C. Beneath the broken bones of the Capitol. Beneath the monuments and dust. Something waited. Not a ruin. A bunker. A throne. Crag scratched his head, muttering. Even if something's left, it'd be buried under 2,000 tons of reinforced concrete, collapsed history, and radiation thick enough to melt steel. Elias narrowed his gaze. Unless you're immune to radiation. Immune to fear. Immune to death. Everyone looked at Johnny. He didn't blink. You want answers. He tapped DC on the map once. Hard. They started there. Before the bombs. Before the vaults. They made a world. Then watched it burn. If there's any place they kept their real name, it's under that city. Helena swallowed hard. You go there, and you may not come back. Johnny's voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't come back from Vault 717 either. He looked up. Eyes glowing again. The same light that had terrified scientists. That had led Lancaster through fire. That still didn't blink in front of gods or monsters. So we gear up. We plan. Because if we want to rip the Enclave out by the roots. He pointed to DC. We start at the rotted trunk. Johnny laid the plan down with the weight of someone who'd already walked through hell once, and was now getting ready to do it again. This time, alone. The war room was dead quiet. Not out of protest, but out of respect. Because everyone knew what kind of place Washington, D.C. had become. And no one, not Elias, not Helena, not even Milo, was going to pretend this wasn't madness wrapped in strategy. Johnny stood at the center of the room, the map flared wide beneath a dim chem lamp. He pointed to the Capitol wasteland, tracing the Potomac like it was a river of fire, then tapped the marker that still blinked faintly over Vault 101. Here. We use this place as our staging ground. It's untouched. Sealed. Never opened from what I've heard. No activity, no lights, no signals. But it's location that matters. It puts us on the edge of what's left of DC without diving into the storm until we're ready. He looked up, locking eyes with each of them. I want ghouls and mutants only on this run. No exceptions. Milo raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. Johnny kept going. The super mutants in that region aren't like Craig's crew. They're unstable. Violent. Driven by something we don't fully understand. But they're predictable. They don't want ghouls. Too irradiated. They think they're rot. Mutants. They get ignored. Too similar. Not worth the effort. He paused. Humans though? They take humans. Alive. And they change them. Helena winced. Elias stiffened. Johnny continued. This isn't just recon. I'm going into the belly. I want no attention drawn. No incident. You all stay posted at Vault 101. You dig in, you fortify, you don't leave it unguarded. If I come back in one piece, good. If I'm bleeding out, help me walk. But if 30 days pass. His voice dropped like the sky falling. And you don't hear a damn word from me. He looked at Milo first. Then Craig. Then Elias. You go home. Tell Lancaster I died for a future. Not for a monument. Milo's jaw tightened. but he gave a single nod. Crag grunted, one hand tightening on the haft of his warhammer. Elias exhaled slowly, like trying to breathe through iron. Helena just whispered, "You sure you want to do this alone?" Johnny gave a ghost of a smile. "I'm not sure of anything. But I've walked through FEV forests. Lived in the dark with whispers that tried to own me. Burned Vault-Tec and buried monsters. If there's anyone who's going to make it through that city." He looked to the map. To the ruined capital. To the rotted throne of the old world. "It's the ghost of Vault 717. He grabbed his coat. Checked the cylinder of his Magnum. Clipped a pack of stim injectors to his belt. "Camp goes up in 4 days. Get your gear. No humans. And remember, if I vanish." He paused in the doorway, casting one last look over his shoulder. Eyes glowing like warfire under a cold moon. "Don't follow. Just make what I died for last."